A shy girl undergoes gynecological surgery. Shockingly, her doctor is a young millionaire, and he falls deeply in love with her. The air in the waiting room felt thick, heavy with the faint scent of antiseptic and quiet murmurs. Emily Harper sat in the corner, her hands clenched tightly in her lap, thumbs rubbing over each other again and again in a nervous rhythm. Her legs bounced involuntarily, the anxiety rolled in waves too strong to ignore. She had put this off for years. Her gynecological issues had grown worse. And despite the dull pain that had become her new normal, the idea of letting someone, especially a man, near her again was unbearable. But her doctor had insisted. "You can't ignore this any longer," she had said, her tone both kind and firm. Emily was sure she had requested a female physician when she made the appointment. She triple-checked the box on the online form. She remembered it clearly. So when the nurse called her name and said, "You'll be with Dr. Adrien West today," her heart slammed against her ribs. "Wait," she said, standing abruptly. "Is he male?" The nurse blinked. "Yes, Dr. West is one of our top gynecologists. Is something wrong?" Emily took a step back, her throat tightening. I thought I was scheduled with a female doctor." The nurse gave a polite but apologetic smile. "I'm sorry. There might have been a scheduling change, but I assure you, Dr. West is extremely professional. He's helped many women who came in just as nervous as you. You're in very good hands." Emily hesitated, torn between fear and necessity. Her abdomen throbbed gently, a cruel reminder she needed help. And yet everything in her screamed to run. She looked at the closed exam room door, then back at the nurse. I don't like being touched," she whispered, barely audible. "I understand," the nurse said softly. "You can stop the exam at any time. Nothing will happen without your consent." Emily's pulse pounded as she nodded stiffly, following the nurse down the hall. Every step felt like walking toward a memory she had spent years trying to bury. Inside the room, she changed into the medical gown, the fabric cold against her skin. She sat on the edge of the examination table, arms wrapped tightly around herself, breathing slow and shallow. A soft knock came. "Miss Harper, may I come in?" She didn't answer, only stared at the wall. The door creaked open. Dr. Adrien West stepped in, holding a clipboard. His presence filled the room, not in an intimidating way, but in a calm, grounding sense. He was tall, lean, with kind hazel eyes and a voice smooth like calm water. "Hello, Emily," he said gently, setting the clipboard down. "I'm Dr. West. I understand there was some confusion about the appointment today. I want you to know if you're uncomfortable for any reason. We can reschedule or stop at any moment. You have full control here." Emily didn't meet his eyes. "Just get it over with," she murmured. Adrien nodded, not offended by her tone. "All right. I'll talk through everything I do before I do it, okay?" She gave the faintest nod. He began with basic questions, keeping his tone light but respectful. She answered quietly, her hands fidgeting with the hem of the gown. When it came time for the physical exam, he explained everything in clear, professional terms. "I'm going to examine your lower abdomen now," he said. "Let me know immediately if you feel any pain or discomfort." He pressed gently, starting from the outer areas. She was tense beneath his fingers, every muscle rigid. As he moved closer to the pelvic region, his hand, still outside the gown, accidentally brushed too close to her inner thigh. Something inside her snapped. Her eyes widened. Her breath caught. "Don't touch me!" She shoved his hand away, jerking her body back so violently that the stirrups clanged against the metal table. Adrien stepped back instinctively, both hands raised in surprise. Emily scrambled off the table, holding the gown tightly against herself, her eyes filled with tears, wide with fury and panic. "Do you even know what you just did?" she screamed. "Do you think because you wear that coat, you can just touch women however you want?" "Wait, Emily. Adrien began, but she was already backing toward the door. "Don't talk to me. Don't follow me. Just stay away." She flung the door open, tears spilling down her cheeks, and ran out barefoot down the hallway. The nurse tried to call after her, but Emily was gone before anyone could react. Adrien stood there in stunned silence, his face a mixture of concern and confusion. His hands still slightly raised, he lowered them slowly, his mind reeling. He had no idea what had just happened, but he could feel it. This wasn't about him. Something deeper had been triggered in that room, and whatever it was, it had left a wound wide open. Emily slammed the door shut behind her, chest heaving like she'd outrun a storm. Her coat slipped from her shoulders, forgotten as she dropped to the floor, back pressed against the door. Her arms wrapped around herself, trying to keep from falling apart. Tears came fast, hot, angry, unstoppable. She had thought she could handle it, thought time had dulled the pain, but one accidental clinical touch had sent her spiraling. The panic, the shame, the memories, they all came rushing back. She was 15 again, awkward and shy, her body beginning to change in ways she didn't understand. It was a routine school health screening. Her classmates joked and teased each other while waiting their turn. When her name was called, she entered a small partitioned room where a middle-aged male doctor waited with a too-wide smile. At first, it was normal blood pressure reflexes, but then his hands lingered. He commented on her development and said he needed to check something for her future health. She remembered the way his fingers brushed her chest, how close he leaned in, his breath heavy with coffee and mint. Frozen with confusion, she hadn't known what to do until she ran. She told her teacher, the nurse, even her mother. No one believed her. "Emily, are you exaggerating again?" Her mother sighed. "He's been coming here for years," the nurse said. "He's perfectly professional." The kids were crueler. She just wants attention. She probably misunderstood. What a drama queen. Emily learned then that sometimes the truth didn't matter. Not if no one wanted to hear it. She stopped speaking up, stopped attending sleepovers, stopped trusting. Her world shrank until silence was the only place that felt safe. And even now, 10 years later, that silence clung to her like a second skin. She pulled herself off the floor and stumbled into the bathroom, splashing cold water on her face. Her reflection stared back, older, but not stronger. She hated that she still trembled, that her skin felt wrong again, that she had trusted the system, only to be shattered once more. Adrien hadn't meant harm. She knew that, but her body didn't care. It remembered. Wrapped in a blanket on her couch, she stared out at the gray sky. The pain in her abdomen pulsed dully, a quiet reminder that fear wouldn't make it go away. She needed help, but how could she ask for it without losing herself again? 3 days passed. She called in sick the first day, the second, but on the third morning something pulled her back to the bookstore. Her tiny sanctuary of old pages and quiet moments. The bell above the door chimed as she entered. Sunlight spilled through dusty windows, warming the familiar shelves. She brewed herself peppermint tea and turned on the soft jazz playlist. By mid-morning, the shop had returned to its usual rhythm. Customers browsing, the occasional chat, the rustle of turning pages. Emily kept to herself, restocking bookmarks behind the counter. Then the bell chimed again. "Excuse me," came a voice, calm, familiar. She froze. She didn't need to turn to know who it was. Dr. Adrien West stood in the center of the store holding a small notebook. His expression was surprised, almost apologetic. He wore jeans, a navy coat, no white coat, no stethoscope, just a man who hadn't expected to see her either. "Emily," he said carefully, "I didn't know you worked here." She blinked, heart thudding. "Are you following me?" "No, I swear. I didn't know. My mom loves old books. She's recovering from surgery. I thought this place might have something for her." She looked away, gripping the counter. "I just wanted to say—" He stepped closer cautiously. "I'm sorry about what happened at the clinic. I never meant to make you uncomfortable. If I did anything inappropriate—" "You didn't," she interrupted sharply. He paused. Emily's voice was cold. "I know you didn't mean to, but that doesn't change how it felt." He nodded. "I understand. I really do." There was a beat of silence. The store suddenly felt too small. "I just wanted to apologize," he continued. "Not as a doctor, as a person. You didn't deserve to feel unsafe." Finally, she looked at him. Not at the doctor, at the man. He didn't look polished or guarded. He looked tired. Human. "I don't need a doctor's pity," she said flatly. His eyes softened. "I'm not offering pity. I'm offering understanding." Emily shook her head and stepped past him toward the back shelves. "You don't know anything about me." "Maybe not," he replied, voice quiet. "But that doesn't mean I don't care." She paused, but only for a moment before disappearing into the back room. When she returned, he was gone. 3 days later, Emily walked through the park on her lunch break, a cup of coffee warming her hands. The crisp air carried the scent of fallen leaves, as autumn painted the ground in gold and red. The park was only a block from the bookstore, a quiet escape she often turned to when her thoughts grew too loud. She settled onto her usual bench by the pond, letting her breath slow. But before she could relax, a startled cry drew her attention. Across the path, an elderly woman had tripped on a cracked section of sidewalk. Papers and books spilled from her bag as she struggled to sit up. Before Emily could move, someone reached the woman first. Adrien. He knelt beside her, calm and gentle, checking her leg and murmuring soft reassurances. Then he made a call, likely to a family member, and picked up her belongings, carefully brushing off dirt from her coat. Emily watched from behind a tree, unseen. He wasn't in scrubs, wasn't on duty, but every action was thoughtful, kind, second nature. The woman clutched his hand gratefully, whispering something that made him smile. He helped her to a bench, then wrapped his own jacket around her shoulders. Emily's chest tightened. She remembered his steady voice at the clinic, his care even after her outburst. And now, seeing him with this stranger, gentle, present, human, something softened in her. Maybe she had been too harsh. Maybe not every man in a white coat was the same. She stayed on her bench until the woman's daughter arrived, and Adrien gave a final wave before disappearing down the path, hands tucked into his pockets. Emily didn't call out, but the image of him kneeling in the dirt, jacketless in the cold, stayed with her long after he was gone. That evening, the bookstore closed later than usual. Emily stayed behind to sort through a donation of vintage poetry books, losing track of time. By the time she locked up, the streets were quiet. Her phone battery blinked low. She pulled her scarf tighter and decided to take the alley shortcut home. She usually avoided it, but the night was growing colder fast. The alley was darker than she remembered. Her boots echoed sharply on the pavement, and a prickling sensation crawled up her spine. Footsteps. They matched her pace, steady, intentional. She glanced back. A man in a dark hoodie followed, hands in his pockets. Gaze fixed on her. Her breath caught. She picked up speed. So did he. She turned a corner. The street ahead was empty. She fumbled for her phone, but her fingers shook too much to unlock it. "Hey!" the man called. She ignored him. "I said, hey!" he repeated, louder now. She ran. He grabbed her arm. "Don't run from me, sweetheart." Panic surged. She screamed, twisting free, her bag hitting the ground. He reached again, then headlights cut through the dark. A car screeched to a stop. "Hey!" a voice roared. "Adrien!" He jumped from the car, sprinting toward them. In one swift move, he shoved the man back, stepping between them, fists clenched. "Walk away now!" The man backed off, muttering curses before disappearing into the shadows. Emily collapsed to her knees, trembling violently. Adrien knelt beside her, steady and calm. "Emily, are you hurt?" She couldn't answer. Her hands clutched her coat like armor. Gently, he brushed hair from her face. "You're safe now. I've got you." She met his eyes, fierce, sincere, and gave a small nod. He helped her up, gathered her things, and guided her into the passenger seat of his car. She didn't resist. Inside, he handed her a bottle of water. "Sip this slowly?" She did. The shaking eased slightly. "I was heading home from the hospital," Adrien said softly. "Took a detour. I'm so glad I did." She finally found her voice. "Thank you." "You don't have to thank me," he replied. "I'm just sorry that happened." The drive was quiet. When they reached her apartment, he insisted on walking her up. Inside, she sank onto the couch while he knelt in front of her, gently cleaning a scrape on her hand. "It's not deep," he murmured, "but it might sting." She didn't flinch. The realization hit her. He was touching her skin, and she didn't feel fear, not panic, not disgust, just calm. "You're good at this," she whispered. He glanced up with a smile. "Patch-up jobs or showing up at the right time?" She smiled. Faint, but real. "But I'll stay until you fall asleep," he offered, and he did. He sat in the armchair across the room, reading quietly as she lay under a blanket. Her body, for the first time in years, allowed itself to rest. Before sleep took her, she looked at him one last time. For years, fear had shaped her world. But tonight, someone had stepped in. Not to hurt, not to fix, but simply to be there. And that changed everything. The next morning, she texted him. "Emily, thank you again for last night." Adrien, "Anytime, always." From then on, they began texting more often. Sometimes about books, sometimes about life. Nothing too personal, but enough to keep her thinking about him. And for the first time in a very long time, Emily didn't feel so alone. The following week brought with it an unexpected chill, both in the air and in Emily's world. She had just arrived at the bookstore and was setting up the window display when her co-worker, Sarah, called out from the front counter. "Hey, Emily, you might want to see this." Emily walked over, wiping dust from her hands. On the store's small television, a local morning news segment was playing. "Today on Spotlight on Changemakers," the anchor said, "we feature one of the youngest and most successful medical professionals in the state, Dr. Adrien West, heir to the West Medical Foundation and head of their Women's Health Division." On the screen appeared a photo of Adrien smiling in scrubs, standing outside a hospital. His name was printed in bold at the bottom, Dr. Adrien West, medical director and philanthropist. The report went on, showcasing images of cutting-edge facilities, charity events, and groundbreaking research funded by the West family. Adrien was shown delivering speeches at conferences, consulting with global health leaders, even shaking hands with politicians. Emily's fingers curled around the edge of the counter. "West Medical?" Sarah said, raising an eyebrow. "Isn't that like $1 billion foundation?" Emily didn't respond. She couldn't. Later that evening, she sat alone in her apartment, laptop open, staring at article after article about the West medical dynasty. Adrien wasn't just a gifted doctor. He was the Adrien West, the only son of Gregory West, one of the most powerful figures in the healthcare industry. She scrolled through photos of luxury events, fundraisers at mansions, gala appearances. In all of them, Adrien looked perfectly composed, dignified, and completely out of reach. It didn't make sense. He drove a modest car, wore plain clothes, helped an old woman in the park without fanfare. He didn't act like someone born into wealth, but it didn't stop the knot forming in her stomach. It was all of it. His kindness, his attention. Even the night he rescued her, just some act, some project to make himself feel noble. The next time she saw him, she didn't wait for pleasantries. It was at a coffee shop near the hospital. He was standing in line, flipping through a small notebook. She approached, heart pounding. "Adrien?" He turned, surprised, then smiled. "Emily?" "Hey, who are you?" she asked bluntly. He blinked. "I saw the segment," she added. "The interviews, the charity work, the dynasty." He exhaled slowly. "Ah, so you found out you're not just a doctor. You're that doctor?" Adrien gave a slight nod. "It's true. My father built the foundation. I grew up in hospitals and boardrooms." "And you didn't think to mention that?" Her voice rose. "What was the plan? Be the charming, humble guy so the poor girl with trauma would open up to you?" His face didn't change. He didn't get defensive. "No," he said simply. "I didn't tell you because I didn't want that part of my life to be the first thing you saw." Emily crossed her arms, her walls going up again. "So, which part is real? The doctor who helped me in the alley or the man who eats dinner with senators?" Adrien looked at her for a long moment, then gestured to the nearby park bench. "Can we sit?" She hesitated but followed. Once seated, he spoke carefully. "Emily, I grew up with every opportunity handed to me. But I also grew up with parents who barely looked at each other. A mother who threw charity galas but never showed up for my recital. A father who taught me how to negotiate before he taught me how to ride a bike." He looked at his hands. "I chose medicine because it was the only place I felt useful, grounded, real. And when I started working in women's health, I saw how much pain and shame so many women carry in silence. I wanted to do something that mattered." He turned to her. "I never pretended to be someone I'm not. But I didn't lead with my last name because I didn't want it to be a wall between us." Emily studied his face. There was no trace of arrogance, no polished PR speech. Just sincerity. She looked away, her voice softer. "I don't know how to trust people like you. People who have everything." Adrien offered a faint smile. "I don't have everything. Not even close. But I'm trying to live honestly. And if that scares you, I understand." There was silence between them, not cold, but contemplative. Then she asked, quieter still, "Why me?" He didn't hesitate. "Because you don't see me for what I have. You see through me. You challenge me. And because the night I saw you run from that exam room, I saw someone braver than most people I've met in my entire life." Emily looked down, overwhelmed. Maybe it wasn't about the money. Maybe it was about the way he made her feel, seen, safe, and never judged. She nodded. Slowly, and for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that Adrien might be real. The wind had started to warm again, a soft promise of spring in the air. But Emily felt no comfort from the change in season. The pain had returned, stronger, sharper, more persistent than before. For weeks she had ignored it. She took over-the-counter meds, distracted herself with books, told herself it would pass. But deep down, she knew better. The diagnosis had been clear. Without surgery, her condition could worsen. Fear had kept her frozen. The thought of lying unconscious, vulnerable under someone's hands, it paralyzed her. Until now. She stood outside West Medical's private hospital, staring up at the glass exterior as her heart pounded against her rib cage. Her fingers tightened around the strap of her bag. Then, with a breath she didn't realize she was holding, she stepped inside. The receptionist greeted her kindly. "Can I help you?" I'd like to speak to Dr. Adrien West," she said. The woman tilted her head. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," Emily replied. "But he knows me. Just please tell him it's Emily Harper." Less than 10 minutes later, Adrien appeared in the hallway, his expression shifting from surprise to concern. "Emily," he approached gently. "What's wrong?" "I need the surgery," she said without hesitation, "and I want you to do it." Adrien blinked, clearly taken aback. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "I've thought about it. I've tried to avoid it, but I know I need it. And I trust you." He looked at her with something between awe and quiet reverence. "You have no idea how much that means." The days leading up to the procedure were a strange mixture of anxiety and calm. Emily still had her fears, but they didn't control her anymore. Adrien walked her through every step of the process, thorough, patient, never rushed. He gave her space when she needed it, reassurance when her voice wavered. He never treated her like a case. He treated her like a person. The night before the surgery, he checked on her at the hospital room where she'd be staying. She was already in bed, hospital gown on, IV in her arm, staring out the window. "I won't ask if you're nervous," Adrien said softly. "I am," she admitted, "but less than I thought I'd be." He sat beside her. "Do you want me to talk you through it again?" "No." She turned to him, her eyes glassy but determined. "I just want you to know something." He waited. "I don't trust easily. I don't let people close. I've lived half my life behind a wall because of what someone took from me." Adrien's jaw tightened, but he remained silent. Emily inhaled deeply. "But you didn't push. You didn't force. You waited. You listened. And somewhere along the way, without trying to, you earned something I thought I'd lost forever." Her voice trembled. "I don't trust doctors. I don't trust men. I don't even trust myself sometimes. But I trust you." Adrien's throat worked to swallow his emotion. He placed a hand gently over hers. "I won't let you down," he said, voice thick with sincerity. The next morning, the surgical team prepped early. Adrien scrubbed in, his mind sharper than ever. He had performed this procedure dozens of times, but this time felt different. This time, the patient on the table wasn't just a name on a chart. She was Emily, the woman who had flinched at his touch, who had run from his office, who had every reason to fear him, and still came back. He was going to protect that trust with everything he had. The operation began. Every move was meticulous, every incision precise. He communicated calmly with his team, eyes never leaving the task. Hours passed, but he didn't feel time, only the steady rhythm of focus and care. When it was over, he removed his gloves and exhaled. "It went perfectly," he told the nurses. But he didn't leave right away. He stood by her bed in recovery, watching the soft rise and fall of her chest. She looked pale, fragile, but peaceful. She had made it through, and so had he. Emily woke hours later, groggy, sore, but alive. Adrien was there sitting in the chair beside her bed, half asleep with a book in his lap. She stirred slightly. His eyes opened instantly. "Hey," he said, smiling gently. "Welcome back." She blinked, her voice a rasp. "Did it work?" "Everything went perfectly," he said. "You're going to be just fine." Tears slipped down her cheeks, not from pain, but from the overwhelming relief. "I did it," she whispered. "You did," he agreed, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "You were so brave." She closed her eyes, letting his words wash over her. In that quiet room filled with the scent of antiseptic and hope, Emily felt something shift inside her. The fear wasn't gone, but it was no longer in control. For the first time in years, she wasn't surviving. She was healing. The days after Emily's surgery passed in a haze of healing and quiet moments. Adrien visited often, not as a doctor, but as someone who simply cared. He brought her favorite tea, sat beside her while she read, listened without needing to fix anything. Their conversations grew deeper, more effortless. There was an unspoken tenderness between them, fragile yet warm. Emily was healing, not just physically but emotionally. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel broken. But the world outside their cocoon wasn't as kind. One afternoon after her final checkup, Emily lingered near the waiting area while Adrien wrapped up paperwork. She wandered down the hall to stretch her legs, walking slowly past a group of nurses chatting near the break room. They didn't notice her. "She's still here," one of them said in a voice meant to sound casual, but sharp. "You mean the girl Dr. West operated on?" another responded. "Yeah, she's been around a lot lately." "Well, of course she has," the first nurse snorted. "If I were a patient with no money, no status, I'd hang around a millionaire doctor too." They all laughed. "She's just a damaged girl who got lucky. She's not his type. Not even close." Emily stopped in her tracks. Her stomach twisted. Their words felt like needles, sharp, small, but aimed straight at her most vulnerable place. She backed away slowly, heart thudding. She didn't hear the rest. She didn't need to. That night, she didn't sleep. She sat at her kitchen table with a cup of untouched tea, staring at the words she had written on a simple piece of paper. "I'm grateful for everything, but I think it's time for me to leave. You deserve someone whole, someone strong, not someone you had to fix. Don't look for me." She placed the note on the windowsill where she knew Adrien would find it the next time he came by. Then she packed a small bag and slipped away into the night. Adrien arrived at her apartment the next morning with 2 coffees and a book he thought she'd love. He knocked. No answer. He used the key she had once shyly given him and stepped inside. It was quiet. Too quiet. Then he saw the note. His heart sank as he read the words, the meaning cutting deeper than he expected. She's gone. He called her. No answer. He called the bookstore. She had asked for time off. Panic crawled up his spine. He searched every place he could think of. Parks, cafes, even the quiet bookstore corner where she used to sit and read alone. But she was nowhere until late that evening. He remembered the place where it had all changed. The small park near the pond. The one where he had, helped the elderly woman months ago. The place where Emily had first seen him. Not as a doctor, not as a stranger, but as a human being. He drove there with a silent prayer and found her. She was sitting on the bench by the water, knees pulled to her chest, eyes swollen from crying. She didn't look up when he approached, but she didn't move away either. He sat beside her in silence for a long moment, letting the wind speak first. Then he said softly, "You didn't even give me a chance to fight for you." Emily wiped her cheek with the sleeve of her sweater. "You shouldn't have to." He turned to her, voice firm but full of emotion. "Why do you keep believing that your pain makes you less?" "Because it does," she whispered. "I'm the girl with scars. I'm the one with baggage and fear and trust issues. And you? You're Adrien West." His gaze didn't waver. "I don't want easy," he said. "I want real. And you? You're the bravest person I've ever met." Emily shook her head. "You don't know what they're saying. The nurses, the people in your hospital. They think I'm just some poor broken thing clinging to a rich man." He reached out, taking her hand. "I don't care what they say. I care what you say. And right now, all I hear is a voice that's been trained to doubt herself." He squeezed her fingers gently. "But I see you, all of you, and I choose you, again and again." Tears welled in her eyes. "You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be healed. You just have to be you. That's all I've ever wanted." Her lips trembled. "I was so afraid," she whispered. "So was I," he said, "until I met you." She leaned into him, and he pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her like a shield. In that moment, the noise of the world faded. Because when truth is louder than doubt, love finds a way to be heard. The small storefront sat on the corner of a quiet street, nestled between a florist and a coffee shop. A hand-painted sign hung above the door. "Heal her soul. Books bruise." The windows were lined with cozy armchairs, soft lighting, and stacked shelves filled with books, chosen not for profit, but for purpose. Inside, laughter and the aroma of fresh coffee mingled with the sound of pages turning. Emily stood behind the counter, her smile gentle, her spirit calm in a way that only comes from surviving the storm and choosing to keep walking. It had been a year since her surgery, a year since she ran away, and a year since she returned to find not just Adrien waiting for her, but a version of herself she had almost given up on ever finding again. Heal Her Soul wasn't just a bookstore. It was a space for women to breathe, to read, to be safe. Each corner held something intentional: a shelf on healing from trauma, a reading nook by the window named the Brave Spot, a wall of sticky notes where visitors wrote anonymous messages of hope to strangers. Adrien had helped renovate the space, installed the lighting, picked out the flooring, even assembled the mismatched furniture she loved. He never tried to take over, just quietly made her vision possible. He still worked at the hospital, still wore the white coat when he had to. But at home with her, he was just Adrien. Not the heir, not the philanthropist, just a man who loved books almost as much as he loved the woman who ran the shop. They had kept things simple after reuniting, no pressure, no timelines. But when Adrien proposed, he did so with a small note tucked into a first-edition copy of Jane Eyre. It simply read, "You are no bird, and I am no net. Let's fly together." And so they did. The wedding was held on a quiet stretch of beach, just as the sun began to dip below the horizon. There were no paparazzi, no headlines, just the sound of waves and a circle of people who loved them both. Emily wore a soft, flowing gown, bare feet pressing into the warm sand. Adrien waited for her beneath a wooden arch wrapped in wildflowers, a crooked grin on his face as she approached. They exchanged vows written by hand, filled with promises that were never flashy but deeply real. "I will not fix you," Adrien had said, "because you were never broken. I will not fear love any more." Emily whispered. Because you showed me love can be safe. As the ceremony ended and the first stars appeared, they stood hand in hand at the edge of the sea, quiet for a moment, while the others danced behind them. The breeze caught Emily's veil, lifting it slightly, and she turned to Adrien with tears in her eyes, not of pain, but of fullness. She reached up, touched his cheek. "Do you remember the first time you touched me?" she asked, her voice like a breeze. He nodded slowly. "I do." "I thought I would never feel safe again," she said, a faint smile playing on her lips. "But the day you touched me, not as a doctor, not as a man trying to prove anything, but with nothing but honesty and care." She leaned in, her forehead against his. "That was the day I realized I didn't have to be afraid of the world anymore." Adrien pulled her into his arms. "And I realized," he murmured, "that love doesn't come from rescuing someone. It comes from standing beside them. Every step of the way, they stayed like that, wrapped in silence, wrapped in each other. And in the weeks and months that followed, their life together unfolded in soft, beautiful chapters. Simple mornings, shared meals, late-night conversations about books and dreams, and laughter that healed places medicine never could. Emily still had moments, triggers, shadows that crept in now and then, but now she had light to meet them with. And Adrien, he no longer wondered if his legacy would define him. Because now, every time he walked into Heal Her Soul, he saw the only legacy that truly mattered. A life shared, built not on perfection, but on love, choice, and quiet courage. In the end, it wasn't about being saved. It was about choosing to live together. If Emily's journey touched your heart, if you saw a piece of yourself in her fears, her strength, or her healing, know that you are not alone. This story is a gentle reminder that even the deepest wounds can be mended with patience, compassion, and love. And sometimes, the most unexpected people walk into our lives not to rescue us, but to remind us we're worth rescuing.